Agency for International Development, USAID, is facing major scrutiny with growing concerns about waste and inefficiency. Originally intended to provide humanitarian aid and promote democracy, USAID, critics argue, has become a bloated agency that mismanages taxpayer dollars and even funds groups that work against the U.S. And it funds the left's priorities, not American priorities. Joining me now to unpack this, Dr. Mark Moyar. He previously served at USAID as the director of the Office of Civilian Military Cooperation. He is now chair of the military history at Hillsdale College. He's the author of the book, Masters of Corruption. Dr. Moyar, welcome to Washington Watch. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, great to be with you, Tony.
So critics argue that USAID has become bloated and inefficient, and there's word that Trump wants to shut it down. Does your research back that up?
Yeah, certainly my experience during the first Trump administration shows that it is a big, unwieldy bureaucracy. And foreign aid was originally supposed to be a largely temporary measure after World War II, and the plan was we would phase it out, and we did phase it out in Europe, but it's become perpetual in much of the world, and a lot of it simply is unnecessary or wasteful. And there's people in the agency, including me, who thought there is a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse, and when we tried to report that, we became targets. And the bureaucracy has sought to protect itself and put its own interests first, and that's why I think you're seeing these drastic measures that have been taken in the last week, where they put 60 senior staff on paid administrative leave, which is almost unprecedented. I don't know of another case. And then over the weekend, they had to force out the head of security, who tried to keep them from getting records. And just as of today, it looks like the State Department is going to be taking this agency over.
So, Mark, from both your research and your insider information, having served in there, is there a legitimate purpose for USAID still today? I mean, I know you talked about the history of it, and it should have been phased out, but does it still have a legitimate role to play?
I think parts of it can be very useful. For example, if there's humanitarian disaster overseas and other countries can't deal with it, those are things sometimes we might want to contribute to. When we're negotiating deals with other countries, for example, if we want better trade deals or we want them to stop illegal immigration, sometimes we may want to offer them various forms of foreign aid as an incentive. And a lot of these countries are poorly governed, which is why they still need aid. I think there's some things we can do in terms of training and education to help them out. But much else of what the agency does is not helpful and is, in fact, often counterproductive. I mean, we've seen they've spent huge amounts on DEI, on dubious climate change initiatives, advancing radical LGBT policies. And so I think those sorts of things we will see getting cut and eviscerated here in the very near future.
So if you were to put a percentage on it, Mark, what percentage would you say falls into the category of bloated bureaucracy that we need to get rid of?
Well, that's hard to say, because one of the problems with USAID is they are masters at hiding the money. Though recently, it's been reported that $100 billion in aid to Ukraine seems to be missing. Zelensky saying he never received it. And so there's a huge amount of mystery surrounding all of this. I mean, that was one of the shocking things I found there. 3 years into the Trump administration, we were still finding out about programs that had been hidden by the career staff. So it's very hard to get a handle on this. I'd say probably at least 50% of it could go away. But again, I think now that finally the administration's getting its hands on its records, I have a better idea of where the money is being spent. I should add too, one of the biggest problems they have is massive overpayments to contractors. And so there in itself, you can see a lot of savings.
So, Mark, is the solution, as you mentioned today, that this is now under the purview of the State Department under Secretary Rubio? Is that the answer, or is there other alternatives here? Is it privatization? What do we do here?
My sense is, for now, certainly the preferable alternative is to put it under state where it's more closely controlled and you have strong leadership under Secretary Rubio. I think you may see parts of it parceled off to other agencies that are more relevant. I think going forward, that's probably where things are going to stand. I think there are some valuable pieces, so I don't think you just get rid of it entirely. But part of why you have it under state is that it really is an instrument of U.S. foreign policy. And sometimes, especially under Democrats, it has become, tries to be its own thing. And so Secretary Rubio has made very clear that aid is part of the foreign policy apparatus. And so it does make sense to have it in the State Department.
But did the USAID administrator, were they totally separate from the State Department, or is there some connection there with the Secretary of State previously?
They have been an independent agency. Now, the State Department does have a say over where the money gets spent, but we saw, and I saw certainly when I was there, even in the first Trump administration, it was very difficult to get the career bureaucracy to go along with what the administration, the State Department wanted to do. So this way, I think you'll eliminate any sort of disparities between what aid and state are doing. And you certainly see that overseas, too, where you'll have a State Department and U.S. aid people trying to go in different directions because they don't report to the same people.
Now, Mark, this may be beyond your area of expertise, but does this require congressional action just to kind of eliminate or absorb one agency into another?
Yeah, so I'm not an expert on congressional relations, but it certainly seems that Congress is going to have to go along with some of this. Now, the Republicans, I think, can probably muster the votes. That was a problem the first Trump administration. They couldn't get enough people on the Republican side. But it remains to be seen. I mean, there may be some in Congress who are not sure this is the right way to go, but I think we'll find that out in the next few days, if not weeks.
Yeah, I certainly think even you'll get Democrat support to some degree for reforms, because once I think all this waste and abuse is made public, and I have a feeling we're going to see a lot more of this now that the president's focused on it, Elon Musk, I think you'll move some Democrats in that direction. Dr. Mark Moyar, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your insights on this important topic.
Great talking to you, Tony.